My parents told me it was too risky when I begged for $70,000 to start my startup. But 2 months later, they handed $725,000 to my cousin instead. That was the moment something inside me cracked. Stay with me as I open up this part of my life. And if my journey reaches your heart, show some love by supporting the channel. My name is Maris Elwood, and for years I've been quietly building a dream that meant everything to me. I wasn't trying to become famous or impress anyone. I just wanted to create sustainable materials that could actually help people and the planet. I'd been working on the idea since college, testing small samples in my tiny apartment, saving every dollar I could. By the time I turned 28, I knew I was finally ready to take things to the next level. I needed $70,000 to launch my first real production run. It wasn't a small amount, but it wasn't impossible either. So I went to the two people I believed would understand my passion the most. My parents, Celeste Elwood and Warren Elwood. I remember sitting across from them at the dining table, my hands shaking a little as I explained my idea again. I showed them numbers, plans, projections. I told them how much this meant to me. I truly thought they'd be proud I wasn't giving up. But they just looked at each other, then back at me. "It's too risky, Maris," my father said. "We can't put money into something that might not work," my mother added gently, like she was doing me a favor by saying no. It felt like the air got punched out of my chest. Still, I nodded and said I understood. I didn't, but I tried to. 2 months later, we had a family dinner at my aunt's house. I wasn't expecting anything big, just the same chatter and laughter we always had. But halfway through the evening, I heard something that froze me. My cousin, Caden Faulkner, was bragging loudly about the investment my parents had given him. He was talking about his new luxury winery project. The amount? $725,000. The same people who told me $70,000 was too much handed him more than 10 times that. Everyone at the table acted like it was normal. Like it made sense. Like Caden was the golden boy who deserved it. No one mentioned his past failed projects, the money he burned, or the promises he never kept. My heart felt like it was breaking and boiling at the same time. I sat there, staring at my plate, trying not to cry. But when Caden joked about how he'd probably wing it like usual, something inside me twisted so hard I had to leave. I walked out before dessert, tears filling my eyes, knowing this wasn't just about money. It was about worth. And in that moment, my parents made it painfully clear how little they believed in mine. I couldn't stay silent any longer. The next day, I went straight to my parents, my chest tight with anger and hurt. "Why him?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Why would you give Caden that much money when you refused me? Do you even believe in me at all?" Celeste and Warren didn't flinch. My mother's expression was calm, almost rehearsed. "Maris, you have to understand," she said. "Caden has real leadership qualities. He's a safer bet. We just want to make sure our support goes where it's most likely to succeed." My father nodded in agreement, adding, "We're not saying we don't believe in you, but your cousin has a track record, and we think he's ready for this kind of investment." I felt my stomach turn. It wasn't about the money. It was about the message they had just sent me, loud and clear. All those years, the birthdays they remembered, the advice they gave, the family trips they prioritized, it all made sense now. I remembered Caden always getting the bigger slice of cake, the newer toys, the extra attention, while I had to make do quietly in the corner. I remembered being asked to help clean up after him, covering for his mistakes, cheering him on while my own accomplishments were barely acknowledged. The weight of it all pressed down on me, but in that suffocating moment, a spark ignited. I realized I couldn't rely on their approval. I couldn't wait for them to recognize my value or give me permission to succeed. If I wanted to make my dream real, I had to do it myself. That evening, I went through my apartment and made a plan. I gathered all the things I no longer needed, books, clothes, old electronics, and listed them for sale. It wasn't glamorous, but every dollar counted. I took on extra shifts at my part-time job and stayed late at the workshop where I tinkered with prototypes. Every morning, I woke up before the sun, sketching designs, researching suppliers, and figuring out how I could stretch every cent further. Some nights, exhaustion hit me so hard I almost gave in. I thought about how easy it would be to just step back, to accept that my family didn't see my potential, and to let it go. But every time I felt myself slipping, I remembered that family dinner, Caden laughing, my parents smiling at him as though he was the only one who mattered. That memory fueled me. Bit by bit, my seed money began to grow. It wasn't much yet, but it was mine. Every dollar earned, every item sold, every late night in the workshop was proof that I could make this happen without their support. They had underestimated me, just like they always had. But now I was done waiting for their validation. I had a plan, a goal, and an unshakable determination to prove that I could succeed on my own terms. For the first time, I felt a strange mix of pain and freedom. The wound from their favoritism was deep, but it had given me a fire I never knew I had. I would build my dream, not because they believed in me, but because I believed in myself. I was at a small community workshop, pitching my idea to anyone who would listen. My hands shook slightly as I held up my sketches and samples, explaining how sustainable materials could change the way people thought about fashion. Most people nodded politely and moved on, but then I noticed a man at the back, sitting quietly, observing every word. His name was Emmett Rourke, and there was something in his eyes, a kind of calm intensity that made me feel seen. After the session, he approached me. "I like your idea," he said simply. "I think it has real potential. Do you have a business plan I could look at?" I blinked, surprised. People usually offered vague compliments and disappeared. But Emmett was different. Over the next hour, he asked detailed questions about costs, production, and distribution. He didn't shy away from the hard realities. He wanted to know how I'd make this idea actually work. By the time we left the workshop, I had a mentor I hadn't even realized I needed. Emmett offered to help me refine my plan, pointing out gaps I hadn't noticed. He helped me structure the financials, forecast realistic growth, and even suggested ways to create a small prototype run that could impress potential buyers. I threw myself into the work, often staying up late to adjust spreadsheets, tweak designs, and perfect samples. Emmett was patient but firm, pushing me to think bigger while staying grounded in reality. Within weeks, I had a small batch of prototypes ready. I reached out to local boutiques, showing them my sustainable materials and explaining the story behind the designs. To my relief, they were genuinely interested. One boutique owner even asked if she could place a small order for the holiday season. The first real validation of my work, beyond my own dreams, gave me a rush of energy I hadn't felt in years. Meanwhile, the news about Caden began filtering through our extended family. His luxury winery project was in trouble. Contractors were unpaid, suppliers were frustrated, and whispers of mismanagement started spreading. Every update I heard felt like a quiet vindication. While I was carefully building something meaningful from scratch, he was losing control of what he had been handed. I didn't celebrate it, I knew better, but it strengthened my resolve. I focused on my work, on the prototypes, and on the small victories I was earning one by one. Emmett was there for every step, helping me navigate challenges I didn't know how to face alone. I began to realize that sometimes the support we need doesn't come from family or expected places. It comes from those who see your potential and are willing to invest their time and expertise in helping you succeed. By the time the first boutique placed its order, I felt a quiet sense of accomplishment. This wasn't just about proving my parents wrong anymore. This was about creating something real, something that belonged entirely to me. And for the first time since the family dinner, I felt like I could breathe, knowing that my dream was no longer just a hope, it was starting to take shape. By the time I checked my phone that morning, the notifications were already piling up. Headlines were flashing across social media. Caden's Luxury Winery Experience Center had collapsed before it even opened. Contractors were furious, suppliers were threatening lawsuits, and the community that had once praised him for his vision was now whispering about mismanagement and broken promises. It was hard not to feel a flicker of satisfaction, but I quickly pushed it aside. This wasn't my battle to fight, and I couldn't afford distractions. My focus was my own work, the prototypes I had been perfecting, and the small but growing interest from local boutiques. Emmett and I spent long hours in my tiny workshop, making adjustments, improving materials, and planning the next step. While Caden's world was unraveling, I was quietly building something that had the potential to last. Still, the news kept coming. Friends and distant relatives sent me messages, half concerned, half amused. "I heard about Caden, wow," one cousin wrote. Another text read, "Did you see what's happening with the winery? Your parents must be stressed." I ignored most of it. I didn't need gossip or commentary. I needed focus and action. Emmett, ever steady, reminded me why this was important. "Let them talk," he said one afternoon, adjusting the plans for a new production run. "You're not competing with him. You're building something real. That's all that matters." And he was right. We shifted our energy entirely towards securing proper funding. Emmett helped me polish the pitch, refine the numbers, and anticipate every possible question an investor might ask. After several weeks of calls, presentations, and a few polite rejections, we finally got a meeting with someone who believed in us. Not just the idea, but in us as capable, driven people. The meeting went better than I could have hoped. Our investor was impressed not only by the prototypes, but by our strategy, our vision, and the careful planning we had put into every aspect of the business. By the end of the session, we had a commitment. The first legitimate funding that could turn a small operation into something substantial. I left that meeting feeling a mix of relief and excitement. For the first time, the project I had poured my heart into felt tangible. It wasn't a dream deferred by family bias or limited by financial excuses. It was becoming a reality, and I could see the path forward clearly. Meanwhile, Caden's troubles seemed to intensify with each passing day. His contractors were filing complaints, his suppliers refused to deliver anything further, and whispers about legal trouble started reaching my inbox. I didn't gloat. I had learned that focusing on other people's failures only drains energy. But it was impossible to ignore that his reckless choices contrasted sharply with the careful planning and effort I was putting into my own work. That week, as I sat in my workshop with Emmett going over inventory and schedules, I realized something important. Success wasn't about proving anyone wrong anymore. It was about building something that lasted, about taking control of my own future, and about finally trusting in my own capabilities. While others crumbled around him, I was quietly, steadily moving forward. And that felt more powerful than any vindication. The day I finally launched my first products, I couldn't stop smiling. Months of sleepless nights, long hours, and relentless work had led to this moment. Boxes of prototypes were ready, the designs polished, and the first small batch prepared for distribution. Holding them in my hands, I felt a mix of pride and relief. This was more than just a product. It was proof that my hard work, determination, and belief in myself were paying off. Not long after, I received an unexpected email from a regional textile distributor. They had heard about my sustainable materials and wanted to set up a meeting to discuss carrying my products in multiple stores across the state. I remember my hands shaking as I read it, disbelief quickly turning into excitement. This was the kind of opportunity that could take my small startup to the next level. And it was happening because I had kept pushing, even when my parents doubted me. Local designers and small manufacturers also started reaching out, praising the quality and creativity of my materials. One boutique owner told me she had already received requests from customers asking specifically for my designs. Another designer commented on the innovative approach I had taken, combining eco-friendly fabrics with modern, practical applications. For the first time, I felt recognized for my work, not because of family connections, but because of its own merit. Meanwhile, Celeste and Warren remained largely indifferent. When I casually mentioned the distributor's interest over a phone call, my mother chuckled softly and said, "That's cute, Maris." My father's response was similar, polite, but dismissive, as if my progress was a minor hobby, not a serious venture. I felt a familiar sting, but it no longer had the power to define me. I had learned that validation from them was unnecessary. I was creating real, tangible success without needing their approval. Then one afternoon my phone rang. The caller ID showed Caden's name. My stomach twisted, but I answered, curious to hear what he had to say. He sounded flustered and hesitant. "Maris, I could use some advice," he admitted. "The winery project isn't going as planned, and I thought maybe you could help me figure out a few things." I listened for a moment, then made a decision. "I'm sorry, Caden. I can't help you," I said firmly, my voice steady. "You've had your chance, and now it's time you face the consequences of your choices." I ended the call and set the phone down, feeling a sense of closure. That evening, I walked through my small workspace, looking at the products lined up on the shelves, the orders piling in, and the excitement in every email from potential partners. Despite the dismissive words from my parents and the desperate call from Caden, I felt empowered. My work was being recognized on its own, and I was finally starting to understand the true value of my perseverance. Every small victory now mattered because it was earned, not given. For the first time in a long while, I allowed myself to feel proud, not just of the products, but of the journey I had taken to get here. The rising success wasn't about proving anyone wrong anymore. It was about finally proving to myself that I was capable of achieving something extraordinary. It didn't take long for the cracks in Caden's world to widen into a full-blown collapse. Rumors turned into reality as news of unpaid contractors, late shipments, and mounting supplier complaints became impossible to ignore. The once celebrated Golden Boy was drowning in debts, and suddenly, the people who had celebrated his every move were feeling the strain, my parents included. One evening, my phone rang, and it was my father. His voice sounded tight, tired, almost defeated. "Maris, Caden, he's in trouble again. He's asking for help, and we don't know what to do." My mother chimed in, her tone trembling slightly. "We're stretched thin, Maris. Can you just talk to him? Help him figure things out." I listened in silence, my heart pounding with a mixture of disbelief and resolve. For years, I had been the one dismissed, overlooked, and underestimated. Now they were coming to me for guidance, for emotional support, for reassurance. But I had learned the hard way that my energy and resources were not theirs to borrow. "I can't," I said firmly. "You need to let him face the consequences of his choices. You've already given more than enough." I could hear the hesitation on the other end, but I held my ground. My parents needed to understand that this was not my burden to carry. I had built my own path, and I wasn't about to let them pull me back into the chaos of Caden's mistakes. Meanwhile, my own journey continued to advance. The months of meticulous planning, late nights, and tireless dedication were beginning to pay off in ways I hadn't dared imagine. I received word that I had been awarded a state-level innovation grant for my sustainable materials project. It was a significant amount of funding, enough to scale production, hire a small team, and invest in better equipment. Winning the grant felt like validation. Not from my parents, not from anyone else, but from a credible, external authority that recognized the value and potential of my work. I allowed myself a quiet moment to absorb the significance. Here I was being trusted and supported for my own ideas and efforts, while Caden, who had received tens of thousands from my parents, was floundering. It was a sharp contrast, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of justice in it. Not the vengeful kind, but the kind that comes from seeing hard work, preparation, and determination outweigh recklessness and entitlement. As I sat in my small workspace that evening, reviewing the plans for scaling production with the grant money, I reflected on the journey so far. The collapse of the so-called Golden Boy had no power over me. It was a cautionary tale, a reminder that shortcuts and entitlement rarely lead to lasting success. I felt stronger, more focused, and more determined than ever. My dream was no longer fragile. It had the backing, recognition, and momentum to become something truly remarkable. While my parents wrestled with their financial strain and Caden struggled to recover, I continued to build, step by step, a future entirely of my own making. And for the first time, I felt fully in control of my life and my success. One late afternoon, I was reviewing inventory in my workspace when the door opened, and I froze. Celeste and Warren were standing there, looking around as if they had walked into a completely different world. My heart pounded, but I forced myself to stay calm. They hadn't called ahead, and I wasn't expecting them, yet here they were, staring at the shelves lined with products, the neat stacks of paperwork, and the small team bustling quietly around me. "Maris, all of this," my mother began, her voice wavering. "We didn't realize how much you've built." My father looked equally stunned. "It's impressive," he added, though his eyes couldn't hide the guilt. I took a deep breath, letting the silence stretch just long enough before I spoke. "You know, it's funny. I spent years trying to get your support, trying to prove myself, trying to convince you I was worth taking a risk on. But you never really believed in me, did you?" Celeste shifted uncomfortably, glancing at Warren. We didn't see it coming, Maris. We thought Caden had the skills, the drive." I shook my head, anger and hurt surfacing in my voice. "The skills? The drive? You called me too risky, yet handed him more money than I could ever dream of asking for. You laughed at my plans, dismissed my ideas as hobbies, while every little thing he did was celebrated. Every birthday, every achievement, every family event, you made it clear who mattered most." They were silent now, the weight of their words and my honesty filling the room. Warren finally spoke, voice low and full of regret. "You're right. We underestimated you. We always saw Caden as the real entrepreneur, and we didn't realize what we were missing in you." I stared at them, feeling the sting of those years of favoritism, but also a strange sense of relief. I had said it aloud, confronted them, and they had admitted the truth. Still, relief didn't mean I was ready to forgive or forget. "I appreciate your honesty," I said steadily, "but I want you to understand something. I'm done chasing your approval. I'm done bending over backward to prove that I'm worthy of your attention or your praise. I don't need it anymore. My work, my achievements, and my life are mine to build, not yours to judge." Celeste's eyes glistened, and Warren's jaw tightened. I could see the recognition of their mistakes, but I didn't soften. I had spent too long waiting for them to see me, hoping they would change their minds. Now, I realized the only person I needed to believe in me was myself. I walked past them toward the center of the workspace, holding my head high. "I've built something real. I've earned it on my own. You can watch if you want, but don't expect to control it or take credit for it. I've learned my worth, and I don't need anyone else to define it for me." They remained in the doorway, stunned, as I returned to my team, my focus, and the world I had created. For the first time in years, I felt fully free. Free from expectation, free from favoritism, and finally in control of my own path. Over the next few months, everything changed. My small startup, which had once existed quietly in the corner of a tiny workshop, started gaining recognition across the state. Local media began covering the story, praising the innovation and quality of my sustainable materials. Awards and mentions followed, and suddenly, people were reaching out to me, investors, distributors, and even eco-conscious retailers who wanted a piece of what I was building. It was surreal, and yet, it felt like the validation I had been chasing all along, only now it came on my own terms. For the first time, I didn't have to chase funding or explain why I deserved support. Investors were seeking me out, asking to meet, to see the prototypes, and to hear the plans. I had gone from being dismissed as too risky to being considered a smart, innovative opportunity. I could see the difference in the tone of conversations, the way people treated me with respect, and the seriousness with which they considered my ideas. Then came the email I had been dreaming about. A national eco-retail chain wanted a meeting. The thought of my products on shelves across the country made my stomach flutter with excitement. I prepared meticulously, refining presentations, samples, and talking points. The meeting went even better than I could have imagined. They loved the materials, the story, and the vision. Suddenly, what had started as a personal dream was becoming something far bigger. A company with the potential to reach people nationwide. As the news of my success spread, my extended family began taking notice. Calls, texts, and even social media messages flooded in. "We're proud of you," some said. "You've really done something amazing." I listened politely, nodding at the words, but the praise felt almost surreal given how I had been overlooked for so long. Still, it was gratifying to see them finally acknowledge what they had ignored for years. Of course, Caden didn't take it quietly. One afternoon he called, his voice a mixture of frustration and disbelief. "Maris, you're stealing my spotlight," he accused. "People are talking about you now instead of me. How is this fair?" I didn't even flinch. I took a deep breath and said calmly, "Caden, this isn't about you. I'm not stealing anything. I'm building something that's mine on my own. If people notice, it's because of my work, my choices, and my effort, not anyone else's mistakes or failures." He sputtered for a moment, clearly searching for a comeback, but I ended the call politely and set the phone down. Nobody bought his complaints, and truthfully, I didn't care if they did. This wasn't about revenge in the traditional sense. It was about proving, through my own actions, what I was capable of. Watching my company grow, securing partnerships, gaining recognition, and earning respect from people who mattered. It was all the revenge I needed. Success was my answer, my statement, and my victory. Caden's accusations didn't matter, and neither did my parents' past doubts. I had created something meaningful, lasting, and entirely my own. Finally, I could smile without bitterness, knowing that the best way to respond to years of underestimation and favoritism was simply to succeed, and I was succeeding beyond anyone's expectations. It wasn't long before the ripple effects of Caden's mismanagement hit my parents directly. The lavish lifestyle and reckless spending he had pursued with their backing left Celeste and Warren facing serious financial strain. Bills went unpaid, creditors called relentlessly, and they found themselves scrambling to make sense of the mess they had ignored for so long. It was an ironic twist of fate, seeing the very people who had dismissed me now struggling because of the person they had favored over me. One afternoon, my phone rang. I recognized their voices immediately, my parents, sounding hesitant, almost sheepish. "Maris," my mother began, we're in a difficult spot. Caden's debts, it's more than we can handle. Would you be able to help us? Maybe a loan." My father chimed in, the edge of desperation in his voice. We need $70,000. We know it's a lot to ask, but you're doing well. Please, we don't know where else to turn." I felt a strange calm wash over me. The same exact amount I had requested months ago, the amount they had laughed off as too risky for me, was now in their mouths. I sat quietly for a moment, letting it sink in. I could sense the fear in their voices, the vulnerability they had never shown me before. But I had learned patience, focus, and self-respect, and I wasn't about to let old patterns dictate my choices. "I can help," I said evenly, "but only $5,000. Consider it a gift, nothing more." There was silence on the other end of the line. I could almost hear their minds racing, trying to understand why I wasn't offering the full amount. I continued, my voice calm but firm. "This is what you believed I was worth. I'm just matching the energy. You told me my $70,000 idea was too risky. I honored that judgment. I'm giving you exactly what you thought I deserved." Celeste gasped softly, and Warren's voice cracked. "Maris, I cut in gently, knowing there was nothing left to negotiate. "There's nothing more to discuss. You'll need to figure out the rest on your own. I've already built something valuable with what I had. This is your opportunity to do the same, or face the consequences of your choices." They were stunned, and I didn't feel the slightest guilt. For years, they had underestimated me, doubted my potential, and given preference to someone who consistently mismanaged their support. Now the roles had shifted. I had the power, and I exercised it thoughtfully, without malice, only with clear boundaries and self-respect. After the call, I leaned back in my chair and exhaled slowly. I felt a quiet satisfaction, not from revenge, but from balance. Life had a way of teaching lessons in its own timing, and I had witnessed it firsthand. My parents' request was a reflection of the same judgment they had made about me. I simply responded in kind, proving that fairness doesn't always come from apology. It comes from measured, deliberate action. For the first time, I fully understood the weight of my own worth. I had built it, protected it, and now I had demonstrated it clearly to the people who once doubted me most. After years of relentless work, long nights, and endless determination, I finally achieved a milestone I had only dreamed about: buying a home entirely on my own terms. Walking through the front door for the first time, I felt a surge of pride and freedom. Every corner reflected the life I had built from scratch. The late nights in the workshop, the countless meetings, the small victories that had gradually stacked into something remarkable. This home wasn't just a place to live. It was a symbol of independence, resilience, and everything I had fought to achieve. With the stability of the new home came an opportunity to solidify my business. Emmett, who had been my mentor and unwavering supporter from the very beginning, earned co-founder status. It felt natural to recognize his belief in me and his role in helping shape the company. Together, we refined strategies, expanded production, and elevated the brand's vision. The sense of collaboration gave the business a stronger foundation, and I felt reassured knowing that the people closest to me shared my values and passion for sustainability. Our efforts paid off quickly. The company grew steadily, gaining attention beyond local boutiques and regional distributors. National media outlets began covering the story of a young entrepreneur transforming sustainable materials into desirable, stylish products. Retailers across the country reached out, and before long, the brand had become a respected name in eco-conscious fashion. Every small decision, every prototype, every late night in the workshop had led to this. Proof that consistent effort and belief in one's vision could create something enduring. One afternoon, as I sorted through mail, I noticed an invitation tucked among the bills and delivery notices. It was for a family reunion. A wave of conflicting emotions swept over me. In the past, these gatherings had been a reminder of favoritism, dismissal, and heartbreak. The thought of reconnecting brought no excitement, only the potential to revisit old wounds. I set the invitation aside without a second thought, smiling quietly to myself. Peace mattered more than any pretense of family approval. I had built my life, my company, and my happiness without needing validation from the people who had once doubted me. Sitting in my new home later that evening, I looked around at the space I had claimed for myself, at the products stacked neatly in a small corner office, and at the foundation of a brand that now carried my vision across the country. For the first time, I felt completely in control of my worth, my decisions, and my future. No one had given me this life. Every achievement was the result of my own perseverance, intelligence, and resilience. Finally, I understood what it meant to truly value myself. I had weathered doubt, betrayal, and disappointment and emerged stronger, capable, and independent. I hadn't just survived the challenges, I had built a legacy from them. In that moment, surrounded by the home, the business, and the quiet satisfaction of success, I knew it with absolute certainty. I was enough, I was worthy, and I had earned every piece of it myself. What would you have done if you were in Maris's shoes? Would you have helped your parents after everything, or chosen to focus only on your own path like she did? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'm really curious to hear your take. And if you love stories about determination, family drama, and triumph, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of our new stories.